In our previous video, we showed that there is a positive relationship between the yield curve shape and future GDP growth across 23 different countries, or I should say actually rather 23 different currencies, covering about 88% of the world's gross domestic product. So in this video, we're going to take a look at what those yield curves are telling us about economic growth or likely economic growth in 2020 and 2021. So as it turns out, of those 23 yield curves, 18 of them are substantially flatter than normal. If you sort of index their steepness or flatness relative to their history on a scale of 0 to 100, most of them are between 0 and about 25%. So in other words, they're in the bottom quartile of their historical steepness. And this includes many, many very large, very important economies. So the economy of the United States, Mexico, European Union, many of the smaller European countries, including the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Norway, and Sweden, as well as Japan, have exceptionally flat yield curves that may, in the view of interest rate traders, be pointing towards a tendency towards softening economic growth in these markets. So together, these 18 currencies cover about 75% of our sample, or about 3/4 of our sample. So that's the bad news. It seems as though interest rate traders around the world seem to be thinking that the world economy, at least the economy in many of these Western countries, may be headed towards slower growth in the next 2 years. But the news is not all bad. Among these 23 yield curves, 5 of them are actually steeper than normal. And it also includes some very, very important, very influential economies. Most importantly, China and India, but also very significantly Brazil and South Africa. In these countries, yield curves are significantly steeper than they have been on average in the past. And this may be a sign that in these countries where central banks have recently been easing monetary policy, that their growth rates may be stable or perhaps even pick up, even if the rest of the world economy does slow down a bit over the next 2 years. And I think China's economy potentially picking up steam could be very, very good news for commodity exporters if indeed these interest rate traders in the Chinese markets get it correct and are pointing towards higher economic growth. But that said, I would take all of these yield curves in every country with a grain of salt. In every country, these are useful economic indicators, but they are not perfect. So if they're pointing towards slower economic growth, that may be a general tendency, but it is not a guarantee of slower growth. Likewise, if they're pointing towards a possible acceleration in places like India and China, also not a guarantee that India and China will actually grow more quickly. But nevertheless, we think that these are useful indicators and should not be ignored when doing economic forecasting. I'm Eric Norland, Senior Economist with the CME Group in London.